This is Asteria, and I'm hosting for the first time. Co-hosting with me is Lynette and Oshi. We're going to be discussing Chapter 8.52 with a bunch of fellow readers tonight. Alright, so we're going to start out with a brief summary. This whole chapter's theme seems to be kind of around the conundrum of whether or not to act when, to quote Mishra, something bad is happening. There's a range of characters as per usual, but our main point of views that kind of tackle this question are Mishra and Gyre, Chaldean, the Cyclops. He's definitely giving suggestions, not ordering people around since he's under house arrest. We've got the Fellowship of We Didn't Actually Die, and friends, Will, and the kind of the rest of the group that are tracking the Fellowship, and then Fashi and Yira are also sort of tackling this topic or this theme. The layout of the chapter sort of has these different point of views sandwiched between a split scene where Mishra and Gyre are sort of touring Nolmut and picking up friends along the way. The nuances of each character's decision kind of vary, but they actually all do end up deciding to act rather than watch or, not do anything when something bad is happening or that they consider to be bad. It would have been interesting to actually see a group or a character choose the opposite, just to justify their reasoning. Other notable outcomes from these choices include Nir's revealing his presence to the Fellowship, and friends. The friends include a tribe of gnolls that were being attacked by some drakes, as well as their sort of sometimes goblin ally, the Ghost Hand tribe. We also have the unnamed soldier receiving a name and taking on some paint. We've got Will and Co stumbling, upon their promised adventure. And at the end, Risha gains a new skill in a class. Other random details of note: Pirate seems to have decided to go for a limb loss over named character deaths, which I appreciate. And we've also got some more hints about Syria's background pertaining to her village specifically. I know this is a very brief overview. We'll get into the specifics as we kind of start walking through impressions. So anybody who'd like to step up, what were your impressions of the chapter? Think about particular lines or parts of the chapter that really stuck with you, that you really liked. Why did you like them? Or maybe things that didn't work for you. Or think about characters in the chapter. Which one did you enjoy reading about? Which ones maybe did you not?
Hey everybody, welcome to the discussion for November 17th. Yeah, it was, I don't know. I was super into the stream itself. I'm a stream watcher, so for those who are in Patreon, the pirate tends to stream their writing the chapters when they're writing the chapters sometimes. And it just captured my imagination. But reading over the chapter the next day, I soured a little on the chapter. It wasn't because the pirate was writing to the stream or anything. It just felt busy. Like there wasn't enough build up to some of the events that were happening. Nir's got a good shake. I think the start was very strong. I think the structure of how the fellowship was managed was wrong, but I think at the end it stumbled a little. The denouement didn't feel as strong as it could be.
Stumbled a lot, but okay.
What did you say?
Stumbled a lot, but okay. Keep going.
Yeah. I'm trying to be reasonable here because it wasn't like there was a massive issue or anything like that. But yeah,
Okay.
not for me anyway. But the Mersha parts were underbaked as far as I was concerned.
Yeah,
But
that's fair.
but as a whole, the chapter works. And again, I will refer to pirateaba's acid spoiler thing. They mentioned that they were not going to be able to keep their goal for December, which clearly means they had a goal for December. So this is probably another thing that they just couldn't keep up. Like they were trying to schedule around.
An attempt to speed up, and it's not going well.
Yeah, and I think they're probably going to reorient and work a more reasonable schedule and just accept that whatever they had planned for the end of December is just not going to happen.
Gotcha.
Knowing all that, Than, are you recovered? Can you speak?
Yes, I have successfully drank water. Anyways, honestly, my stand-ons for this chapter were Adter, and Nears. I did not expect him to just jump out of Bird's hat like that and take charge. Because the chapter before this, we saw all the Freelings being secretive and being very secretive because they're rightfully scared of being attacked, and then Nears just, like the crazy Freeling he is, just jumps out there, proclaims "I am here," and paints a giant target on his head.
We do
That was
know
pretty
he's
cool.
a bit insane.
Yeah, just a little bit insane.
And that's relative, really, I think.
Relative.
I think so.
It was an interesting dichotomy, but we have talked about in the past how, like, Nears is kind of, like, insane even for, like, most characters, but according to, like, Freelings, he has, like, the opposite instincts that the most of them have, where he, like, runs to the danger and he wants to be in the spotlight.
Especially since he has a giant bounty on his head right now, and with none of his company's resources around, or co-opted by somebody else, it's a pretty precarious situation to be in.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's trusting 5 or 6 people to keep quiet about his presence, and I'm not really sure how well that's going to go.
Basically?
More than that, I would think. But
Right. This is Wiggles. So I had 4 main thoughts on the chapter, long chapter. First was just that the Drakes are still just as fractured as the Gnolls are overall. Chaldean doesn't want war with the Gnolls, but simultaneously can't let these battles affect Palace or their holdings or allies. And after Zell's and Ciceris's death, they've lost all the individuals who could effectively unite them right now. With their mobilization of armies, the continent is also becoming more and more fractured overall. So there will be a large amount of conflicts between Drakes and Gnolls, Gnolls and Gnolls, and Drakes moving forward. And adding Nears into that mix will even fracture the situation more, as he's trying to protect those he can, but he's an outside influence that can't unite the forces involved here. All of this is in a major backdrop of the future conflict with the gods, and Aaron's revival into the situation will be a major factor in my opinion. My next thought, just like how she's going to try and unite all the people that she views as important to her, how she's going to resolve all of this. I feel like she'll play a major factor in it in the future. And then my next thought was on the Crimson Soldier. Like, he is definitely one of my new favorite characters, and in a lot of ways he personifies what is wrong with the current Antinium and how far they've fallen. The current queens, the Centennium, all view those they've created on this continent as failures, basically, because they aren't what they were at their peak. Yet instead of the queens working with what they have now and developing from that start point, they've tried to make it seem like all of what they have now is expendable to try and get back to where they were previously. If the queens were... Go ahead, Oshi.
do you think that's it's fair to say that the reason the queens are acting this way has been well established?
Yes, because they're so new at this.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. And they saw what their teachers were like, and they have that to look towards. But that's all they really have. They're just too infantile, basically, and they're too adolescent in where they were to go back to being, peak Antinium. And if they were more open to experimentation, if they weren't so focused on becoming what they previously were, they could, they would see, they have individual Antinium right now, like the Crimson Soldier, who are valuable assets, but they'll never really find that without outside influences. So them, being more diplomatic with Gnolls overall and getting more connected with other species is definitely something they need to do to start developing again, because they can't go from being, students who don't know what they're doing to the original Antinium by themselves. They just can't do that. It won't work. It hasn't worked.
Sorry to interrupt, but real quickly,
No.
part of that is I mean, they did go through a massive tragedy, right? And they're clinging to what they know they think works. So from their perspective, like, experimentation wastes very limited resources. They're scared to try new things. They're trying to stick with what they think works. And having that mental switch is going to be very difficult. But I think we are in the process of seeing it starting up.
We have a question scheduled a little bit later that will delve into this. So let's move forward.
But
we have
real quickly,
Wiggles isn't done. Wiggles isn't done.
What were your other 2 points, Wiggles?
So, last part about the Crimson Soldier thing was the Crimson Soldier also shows us a valuable insight into how the system works and how the leveling works. Achievement and adversity are not enough. You know, if that was enough for an individual to level, he would be in the 30s easily. Like, he would be 30 plus with how much he's gone through, with how many battles he's been through, but he's not. You need something else to be able to effectively level as well, whether that's the will to learn, to change, or just the capacity to do so. Then my next point was, awesome fight sequence aside, the fellowships and followers, Orny the Horny and Shaik, seem to be shunted off from the main cast for a while, in my opinion. They've been led off track from their goal, though they'll be accomplishing it in their own way, simply by distracting from the true hunt. Meanwhile, Lynette desperately wants to get to Mersha, and now she knows where she is. But she can't get there through the siege because she didn't have the power to actually force the issue. Now, though, with the Fellowship becoming a true army, I definitely see the possibility of them being contacted by Lynette to get their help in getting to the meeting of tribes. This even plays into how Octavia now has the exact ingredient that Kelt needs for part of the cure, but not knowing it. As soon as Lynette comes in and contacts them, she'll see that they have this, thing they've been missing for now.
Yeah, we definitely do have a lot of offshoots coming up. There's a lot of potential. I don't know how much this chapter set up those potentials that kind of already existed, but you do make a good point that we've got a lot of character connections kind of coming into play soon.
Yeah.
Edge Dancer says, personally, as far as reactions go, the story beat of showing how big and connected the inn is feels a bit played out to me with regard to Mersha knowing people. I would have preferred more of the fellowship perspective.
Totally agree.
I also kind of agree with that because I think the denouement should have focused more on wrap up with that and feelings about how they felt about after the battle, but that's me. Alabaster also says, I feel like the Free Queens are falling for the age-old adage of don't judge a fish on its ability to fly. They made them try to imitate the Antinium, which is making them miss the true value of what they made, which was his 2 cents. Alabaster says that he was a big fan of Crimson reminding us that the Antinium don't know how to fight. I tend to think of soldiers as actual soldiers, but seeing one operate at peak efficiency really brought home that most Antinium are basically just children.
With limited capabilities.
And no teaching. They're not teaching anybody.
Yeah. I think that's it for first impressions, unless somebody else would like to go. Lynette, maybe?
I mentioned this earlier today that all of my reactions for this entire chapter are just going to be, I love it. I love it so much. This is great.
So high pitched, you couldn't even make a sound.
Yeah, exactly. If I was gonna say, it's literally you. As who's the writer of The Name of the Wind? He was in that pink parka. Yeah, he was in that pink parka. I'm picturing you doing that the whole fucking time.
All right. So then, go ahead.
Vizier says that the whole pity party / crowd all fawning over Mersha might have been a bit much at the end.
We will get to that.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
He says that one thing he finds weird about Niers is how he's okay with helping goblins randomly now, and I would like to address that one actually. I think Niers is in the same boat as Aaron as far as viewing how he views the other races. Prairlings don't interact with the other races. So the fact that Niers has been out among the tall folk for so many decades, he sees them differently. Nobody is like him, so he takes all these individuals more as individuals in their own right. Yeah, there are stereotypes that happen, obviously, but like Aaron, he was willing to give people a chance, and he got burned by that.
Yeah.
Badly burned by that. And I think he's still of the opinion that he's willing to give all people, a chance. But as soon as he sees something starting to go down the path he's already been burned by, I think he's already stated it that he will nip it in the bud.
We did have a nice update to Bird's interpretation, though, of Nir's. There was the previous line of, like, Aaron's gonna hate you, and then in this line, or in this chapter, he's like, I don't know if Aaron's gonna hate you or love you. You meet all of her needs, but then you don't. You're just so weird and confusing. So Bird's reactions were, like, on point this chapter.
I think Bird's just on point all the time.
Which is strange, because he's such a strange character, but he's so well written.
It's... Okay, I have a whole
Okay.
thing on Bird. Let's
You're gonna have to pause.
Yeah, let's go on.
Right. So Wiggles set us up actually quite nicely to talk about the first big topic, which is the Crimson Soldier, right? And kind of the main thing with the Crimson Soldier that I think a lot of people were intrigued by was this idea of apparently the Crimson Soldier is female, and is she a true Antinium or a queen, right? There was like that line that kind of hinted about, well, not yet. So what are kind of everybody's thoughts about that?
Where do you get the idea that the Crimson Soldier is female? Because I
thought they referred
didn't
to her
catch
she.
any of that. One other Antinium looked over and said, "Queen?" And that's the only one who did. That is not really enough to... I mean, the soldier thinks of himself as male.
Okay, then that's my misinterpretation with pronouns. But I think there was still good discussion about whether or not maybe, like, the Crimson Soldier's on the verge of something that is the equivalent of like the Queen or Antinium level or not. So are there any thoughts there?
A man can be
me. The pronoun's me, not you.
Yeah. I was just meant that when I said queen, I meant as the concept of how they consider queens. It doesn't. Everyone always
so like
assumed,
the King of the Minotaurs is just going to be a king.
Yes.
Okay.
There was so there was a nuance to the question. Let me unpack it a little bit. So is the Crimson Soldier a true Antinium? The reason we say that is because there's an implication in the text that Bird is able to communicate with him and say his name without speaking to him or communicating even in voice. And the other soldiers and workers were able to respond to the Crimson Soldier's actions as if they were interacting with Kilbakich or Queen. And the impression I had was that might mean that the Crimson Soldier is a true Antinium. And the addendum to that was when the concept of the Queen was brought up by the progenitor Zeu, the idea that popped into my head is, why have I been assuming from the start that all queens are female?
Well, the only reason we know is the only reason we thought that is because they've all been referred to as female.
Yeah, why did we assume that? The Antinium don't think in gender terms. They don't have gender terms unless they choose to. So why would all Antinium be gendered? Any Antinium be gendered unless they choose to. So it kind of blew my mind, the concept that maybe what makes a true Antinium queen isn't necessarily... What if the first queen is just... like all the other queens are female just because they're emulating the first queen, not necessarily because you need to be a female to be a queen or to have the capability to be a queen. Okay, that's my question.
So, my opinion on that scene was just that rather than being a true Antinian right now, he's a leader. He's a leader to these people, to the Antinium, and they want a leader. They need a leader, and the progenitors and the queens really aren't great leaders. And they don't really know what it means to be leaders, and they haven't seen Antinium acting like they've been led except when, when the queens take over Antinium and directly lead them through their mind network or whatever it is.
Real quickly though, what about yellow splatters?
What do you mean?
Well, like
compare.
You're saying that like they haven't seen a similar reaction, but yellow splatters kind of did serve that role. So his Zoo
and
meant yellow splat. Like, had they met, maybe she would have had a similar reaction if she'd seen yellow splatters leading the other soldiers.
They've been part of that hive. They were part of the free hive for a bit, but not like for a long time, and they didn't really observe them for much time at all.
I think you're correct, Mr. Wiggles. They came with the quote-unquote delegation. Remember Pivir and
yeah,
Zayu
and they judged them, but they didn't they didn't focus on them too hard. They were just judging them for what they were worth, and I don't think they really understood that Yellow Splatters is like an icon to the free Antinium, how Pawn is really an icon rather than just a person with levels who, a level 30 person who individually can do, X and Y. Instead, he's influencing all the Antinium around him, and they don't really understand that at this point.
Okay, but basically, my entire spiel is going to be about how I was pretty sure that was just the Aura of Battle. That was both the Aura of Battle and then seeing him and seeing what they could become and just doing it on the spot. Because we didn't see any other real reaction to that aura, right? And aura is happening all the time.
Right.
But everybody started working together, everybody started working smoothly, and they just associate that with a queen, is what I assumed you and the others were saying.
Okay, counterpoint to that. What makes you think the queens don't have aura skills like that, and that's an indicator of a queen?
Oh, nothing. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure that the queens were just created to be queens in the first place, and they're just comparing them.
Are you sure? Because I'm not.
I'm pretty sure on this one.
Edge Dancer says, as far as the Crimson Soldier going, in my opinion, the Crimson Soldier is filling a void that exists right now. There should be warrior queens in these Israel hives, but there aren't. Crimson Soldier isn't a queen, but instead filling the role of one. I'd like to add to that I agree with this a little bit, because they were supposed to be, what was it? Supposed to be 100 queens who came?
Yes.
Were supposed to come, and we got 7 instead, which means that they're frantically trying to fill the ranks, and they can't afford to do the time to do anything else. Kel says, going back to the individuality here for she says, I've assumed that since choice is the primary driver behind Antinium becoming individual, that basically all those who join the fellowship will gain some amount of individuality. In response to synchronicity, remember that they all taught themselves how to waltz just by watching Lionette and Pawn. And then Andromeda Star also said that about the Aura of Battle that caused them to coordinate so well and suddenly understand how to fight better. Since that type of coordination and imparting better battle abilities historically only happens when they are being controlled directly by queens, the prognigators confused the two effects.
Okay.
And then next up in the talking was Dyskanator.
Hello. So I was thinking about that the idea of, is the Crimson Soldier a true Antinium? Are they turning into true Antinium? Is Lewis had the point, because I want to know, I don't think the Israel, and in particular things associated with the Free Queen hive, are going to turn into true Antinium. I think we're seeing a different thing. We're not seeing them try to go back to what they were. We're seeing them try to find something, find the next step in evolution.
So you almost have like a new subspecies showing up.
Right. Or I'm also just talking about the whole starting all these individuals going off and doing things, and maybe they'll develop some of the abilities of the Trentinium, like the sort of the better mental communication and things like that. But I don't think that the Antinium that we're following are going to be Trentinium. There'll be something different, maybe better, maybe worse, but there'll be something different and new, rather than getting back there. And I think that might be true for most of the Israelian the Israelian Antinium when they sort of catch up to this idea.
Okay, I like that.
That's fair.
Hello. Nothing I really consider until hearing other people talk, that the fact that the role the queens play, the title might not even be kind of a gendered role. And I was just thinking back to when, the queens, the Antinoms are birthed in birthing pods now, and kind of the act of physically birthing the Antinoms is kind of like a outdated practice, as one of the queens was really damaged from it, right?
Right.
This is part of what made me rethink what the concept of queen was. We have the Twisted Queen who produced the birther sacs, and they mentioned the damage to the Armored Queen was because she changed herself the most to devolve back into the old way of producing Antinium, which is through biological means. And it's clear that the Antinium had grown to a point where they were effectively creating the test tube children.
Actually, on that point, if this is the old way of doing this, I mean, maybe individuals always, like, they existed back when birthing was more common with the Antinium, but when they moved to the experimentation part, they just totally forgot about what it took for, individuals or birth ants to become, whatever they become.
Yeah, that's the implication of the entirety of the Antinium in Israel, is that in the disaster that brought them here, they lost everything. They are very literally, I believe in the chapter that Ryoka was speaking to Zern, thank you. Zern, about how to do basic chemical checks and to like protect yourself and get rid of bacteria and stuff. It was described as explaining to a hyper advanced civilization how to do the basics because they just didn't have to anymore. And they didn't teach everybody the basics anymore because they had found tools and abilities that replaced that. Did I get another ping from someone?
No.
Did I miss it? No. Okay.
No,
No.
but I think that's the first time I actually remembered a character name instead of a character description.
Okay. So, having said that, what the next question we'll move on to?
Auras. So I think I was seeing in chat after the chapter came out, everybody got very excited about auras. So we're skipping around a little bit in the topics, but now is as good a time as any to talk about all the different auras that we were seeing kind of being flung about this chapter. Did anybody, mostly this is just like, does anybody have any thoughts about auras? Was anybody happy to see how they were displayed? Not really happy to see how they were displayed?
Well, one of the things I found really interesting was Gothica, because Gothica's aura seems to be like super powerful, especially for her level. Like, I think that other specifically time, like we've seen recently, with an aura like actually like deflecting attacks and manifesting in that way, is kind of like Rabbit Eater, who's like over level 30 and has a second class and gets auras in both classes at the end of the chapter. And so I thought it was very interesting that Gothica's aura was so strong, but I think that could also be part of Nir's identifying a special like feature of her class, because perhaps like Goths are kind of an aura-oriented class, which would make sense given that they cultivate a specific atmosphere.
I agree with that because I just look at a Goth and I feel a certain way, so
I want to bring up a special point about Gothica's aura. If you recall Leonette in the inn and Malviola explaining the variances in how auras work, manifestations and how they are measured is that they create an active manifestation and a passive manifestation, and the power of an aura is measured by how not necessarily by how much the aura affects, but how effectively it does what it's supposed to. So, for example, the fact that she's able to actively manifest more than just like forcing someone to do something, but create a physical dart of darkness, so to speak, is that implication of power, I think. And if I could just remember what Maviola said, but essentially ladies are ones that depend on auras, and their auras are based around combat. That's perception. That's what I was going for. So the question
Magnolia said that she only could behave like a lady if everybody saw her as one. So
Right.
she's going to wear a dress out in a muddy battlefield because that's what she needs to do.
Okay.
And I guess
Yeah.
Sammy would be a good display of like being born into the aura, right? Because we did get that shakedown about auras and the whole magic muscle thing with the Geneva chapter.
So on the whole manifestation thing, I think part of the reason why her aura is able to manifest right now is because of the skills she's gotten. Like with the ball she made that she threw at Fier. That almost certainly to me was a direct consequence of the skill she got called Magic of Will. It's like that skill allows her to bridge the gap between, what she should be able to do with her experience and lets her manifest much easier. And it just kind of plays into the whole thing that goths are a really aura-oriented class.
That is a very good point. We're going to go on to Mr. Europe next.
Yeah, to me it also seems like goth, like, unlike other auras we've seen, the goth aura is very, like short range as opposed to others. Like we see all these auras that people project out and are kind of like affect larger areas, whereas Gothica is always just focused on herself until she throws it out, so to speak. I just think it's a concentration issue as well as just a power issue.
Speaking of
an issue about what exactly?
Well, and speaking of
why she's so powerful, it's concentrated right around her most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of like throwing auras out, I wonder if I don't know if we have no Niers as an aura or not, but like looking at Gothica's aura reminded me a lot of Nier's aura on the battlefield. I think it's an aura, right? That gigantic presence that he has that other people feel. We've seen that described a few times, and it seems similar to Gothica. And if she keeps leveling, I wonder if she'll have a similar kind of manifestation like Nier seems to be having, where you can feel him.
I kind of get the impression, well, it felt to me because, well, the skill is called Magic of Will, is that right? She can do magic by willing it into existence. That seems like a precursor to me to a, what was Zern?
Thaumaturge.
Thaumaturge, thank you. I almost said Theurge, and I'm like, that's the wrong class. But if she can just manifest something and get it to do what she wants just by willing it to happen, that feels to me like a lot like what Zern can do. That's an interesting...
That is a very interesting point and a possibility. Then you're up.
I think I'm used to like adding faster because whenever it comes to my turn, somebody's already said what I want to say. But basically, yeah, I was thinking about how Nier's aura, like, I don't think any aura is specifically more powerful than the other, because Nier's, it's kind of spread out, but it's obviously an aura of respect. It's the kind of respect you wouldn't get as a small man on a battlefield. It's probably stopped quite a few people from just shooting him. Honestly, that's what I'm thinking of, because when they...
I think I get what you're trying to say. So, for Nier's, because he's tiny man, but scary tiny man, he manifested an aura that works by forcing, like, making others afraid of his presence or feel his presence. And the ladies work by using the impression that they give of other people, like other people have an impression of them, and they use that to determine what they're able to. So they can slap someone from far away, because a lady can slap someone from far away, or they can become a rose lady or like that. But how does that all those pieces come together for Gothica is like, it is so strange, because I think DM Craft Rat is posting Gothica skills right now, and one of the skills is literally Magic of Will, as was mentioned. So, and she failed 3 other classes that have auras. Knights. It looked like there was a possible soul stealer or something. So it's yes, Lynette. He's literally overcompensating. The
set her
I
up every time you'd acknowledge that.
I just it
You
has
just
to
fall
happen
for it, like, every time.
every time. So I understand. It goes back to what Wiggle said, that the skills are interacting with her aura, and that her power is going to be based around the aura, and it might functionally work like a thaumaturgist. It's an interesting intersection of multiple layers of abilities that have been showing up before.
Have we decided whether or not auras are basically just like a sort of offshoot of the psychic powers we were starting to see develop, but people just don't refer to them like that?
No.
I don't get that impression whenever I think of auras. Everybody has an aura. It grows as you do, and whether or not you're able to manipulate it is either practice or training or self-realization of some sort.
It's essentially the mind.
It's yourself.
Is it mind magic, or is it the magic muscle thing?
So
No.
the auras seem to function, as I said, and Wiggles mentioned before, the auras function as a manifestation of your and others' impression of you, what you project out to the world and what the world sees, and your ability to manipulate and manifest that impression into magical abilities. And the skill allows you to make it a more concrete effect. So the classical thing I always go back to is presidents. When people shake their hands, they go fucking nuts because a president shook my hand. I'm never going to watch it. Or Oprah, when she enters a room and everybody goes crazy because it's Oprah.
You do realize that, like, two of the most awesome individuals that must have auras then are the corn farmer and Joseph.
Yes. But here's the thing. Their powers are explicitly given to them in a different function because they don't see themselves as having that ability. Do you understand? Like, you have to see yourself that way. You have to have the ego, and the ego has to be reflected back.
You had Niers spend 3 years trying to get anybody to join up with him to form an adventuring team. He was literally yelling in order to get, attention and he kept projecting and bullshitting and convincing, and then he spent the next 4 decades doing the exact same thing. So it's no wonder that his projection of his own aura is the equivalent of, stomping on you with the foot of a giant, because it's what he's always done.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Right. I was thinking about the who has Niers and his aura, because we don't, at least as far as I know, he doesn't actually have an aura skill. It's all his personal aura of being a level 67 Grandmaster and all of that, and all of that business that's doing it, or doing.
Does he not have an aura?
He does have an aura. He does have an aura.
Hang on. One person. Go on.
He does have an aura, but he has very little training in it, and he's never been interested in training it very much. So,
okay.
And we learned that in 8.14.
Okay, so it was 8.14.
He was able to pull it back in and withdraw it from affecting people during the games. Whenever Tom said, "I don't think your students can stand on their own," and he goes, "Oh yeah, watch." So he withdrew his support. His aura was bolstering them at that point, and he took it off.
That's a good point.
Hey, so this loops back to Gothica and the Strangeness with her kind of class evolution. And I think there's 2 parts to it. One part would be she's following someone else who has leveled up and tried to bring this new class places and has maybe fallen a little short of a few different ideas. And this is made worse by your class kind of being affected by how everyone perceives you, because he's ridiculed for his goth class. While everyone looks at Gothica and is like, "You have goth, what the hell is that? It could be anything." So this Gothica's having a much easier time leveling into it, even if she probably wasn't a goblin, because it's both kind of still a new thing. It's not a refined idea. So if she passes up the Tarandrian goth, he could end up following in her kind of footstep with where the class develops, is what I'm trying to suggest.
Okay.
That about covers it.
Okay.
got some good takes on auras. It'll be interesting to see how those keep developing. It seems to sort of be, to me, that we've got a couple different types, with people sort of manifesting them on their own versus inheriting them from their parents. But anyway, let's see. Probably the next really big topic that had a lot of discussion was sort of, we got some big secret reveals. I mentioned that Niers kind of revealed himself to the Fellowship and Friends. We had Numtongue outed as a ghost soul bard, right? He's carrying around the old Goblin Lord, and we've got Mirsha basically giving away her presence at, not technically giving it away, but pretty much all but giving it away at the Null Moot. So what were some thoughts here? We got a couple questions. Do you think the Fellowship will find out about Mirsha being safe early? Do you think they'll lose their momentum, maybe head straight to the meeting of the tribes? Basically kind of asking about what's going to be the impact of these secret reveals. Let's see. And then maybe if Dieter finds out that Misha's a Doombringer, how will he retaliate, if at all? So my initial thoughts were Niers revealing his secret was probably he just couldn't help himself anymore. He likes to be the center of attention and kind of start playing around with things. As Chaldrian notes, he's super excited to be playing around on that battlefield. I know he keeps talking about going home, but he seems to be delaying his trip. I was really interested to see the conversation that we didn't get to see that took place between Numtongue and the Goblin tribe. I feel like that conversation would have been very interesting.
I agree.
And Mishra still apparently has not learned how to keep a secret, despite all that has happened to her, and it's a weakness in her character that really needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are my takes. I'll open it up
Mr.
to
Europe?
everyone.
Okay, Mr. Europe has something, and then I did have a huge thing to say about this. Go ahead, Mr. Europe.
Yeah, I think Mirsha is gonna be like investigated by Plains Eye and the Doom Hunters, and they're gonna like start looking into her, and then the white nose that Niers has are gonna get out, and people are just gonna disregard Mirsha at that point, and she's like totally saved because she would have gotten herself killed like a little idiot child she is. But I also think that Niers is going to like his actions are going to get noticed immediately by his students, and they're going to come down and join up with him along with the berserkers and whatnot, and just everything is going to start coming together, so to speak. I also
Keep going.
another revelation kind of that we had this chapter that didn't mention was that apparently Dragon Speaker Lucy, whatever her name is,
Luciva.
yeah, Luciva is like going down south with a big army, and people are worried about what she's going to do in regards to the whole Null situation. And I just thought immediately that obviously she's going down to rescue her 150-year-old daughter. And
Yeah, it was the first
yeah,
thing
that-
I thought
yeah.
too. Yeah.
And that's how that situation is going to be resolved down in Tislia.
Honestly, the whole Drake army thing is probably a comedy of errors waiting to happen. You got various armies that have already been on the move, probably have nothing to do with the Knolls, and yet that's what everyone's going to assume is going down.
It's partly okay.
Lynette had something to say real quickly, Yoshi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh well, and I was going to disagree slightly with Mr. Europe, because I don't think the students, I don't think any of them are clued in enough to what else is happening in southern Israel to catch wind about Niers' group. I don't think they're going to recognize his tactics, because I don't think they've ever seen him use his tactics. He will do something in particular in class in order to teach them something, but it's not necessarily something he himself would do.
I base that around the fact that the first thing they thought of when everything was kicking off was that, oh, do you think, is it possible that Niers is behind this entire situation, just start a race war for fun? And I think that that's why they're going to clue in on it, that if they hear about something major happening, they're just going to assume the first question they're going to ask is this Niers? Just because that's what they seem to assume whenever something huge happens.
And the Iron Vanguard agents on the continent will also probably be thinking the exact same thing.
Yes, which is fun.
And next up, I think, is Dyskanator with a comment on that.
So I was going to say on the topic of them recognizing it, I think the thing is they haven't seen Niers in a large-scale situation where he's actually possibly in danger of losing. Which he is if he tries to take on all of South Israel. I mean, maybe he'll do it, maybe not. So I don't think they have any... I think we're right about not having experience with what Niers is actually going to do in a serious large-scale battle. Because, well, his tools are a lot different than the students' tools, so they're going to do different things. And so they see him doing small-scale things. They see him doing things that he can win at, and his goal is to do it neatly and efficiently without losing any resources, and maybe even without killing other people. But they haven't seen him, roll in with a reasonably sized army and try to carve out a kingdom.
I mean,
which is essentially...
Yeah, no, Sheldon, I'm just agreeing with you. Well, I don't know if he's necessarily at a big risk of losing unless he kind of finally gets like a big army that he's aiming for to be able to play around with. Because I mean, that was one of my favorite lines actually in the story was, right? Chaldron's like, oh, Niers is about to have the time of his life. He has to kick off the whole damn chessboard or whatever it was.
He likes
in the back
to fight
of his head,
everybody.
he's going, that little motherfucker.
Yeah, he definitely is. But I thought even there, it's I think he's in danger. He's in danger of losing the long term. I don't think he's in danger of losing in these smaller scale things, but I think he's in danger of losing I'm going to cobble together a coalition of gnolls and whatever Antinium and maneuver goblins around and fight big Drake armies and prevent lots of massacring while setting up a kingdom. I don't think that's a necessary victory for him. I also think part of why he's doing this is he's finally getting a chance to level as a strategist because he's doing something hard enough.
Okay, I've got lots of that. Hold on. I'm going to let Nerdy Fisher go because I've talked plenty. Nerdy Fisher?
Oh, so kind of backing off the thing with Niers having a situation where they could possibly level, I almost wonder if Niers will intentionally kind of... Because Niers is in this experience where they're kind of old and they don't really do much anymore, and through this adventure they're finding their youthful spirit again. And, we had a scene where Niers was talking about taking over a coastal city and literally creating kind of a city-state for the ghouls and preparing for the Third Antinium War, and I almost wonder if they'll get carried away in this situation to where they'll go overboard. And Niers doesn't really have anybody around to kind of rein them in. There's no Fiona. There's no anybody of kind of their equal or to kind of stop them from going overkill in this situation.
There was a point actually brought up.
Let me get into it. Since it was
all right, Oshi.
So a couple of things to bring up. I got a long one on this. So Niers' whole Chaldeon can see the board. He understands that there's going to be a significant amount. The thing is, Chaldeon isn't worried. That's what I took away from the subsection. He's worried in the sense that, stuff's going to happen and I got to manage all this and, he's going to cause so many problems. But it's like the old man wheezing worrying. He wasn't panicked. And part of that is, I'm sure he's a strategist and he's seen it all. But I think it's because he understands that there's little actual risk. He's more interested in the fallout of what will happen and whether or not there'll be a larger scale conflict between the Drakes and the Gnolls. So from his perspective, Niers will actually stabilize the situation a little bit by giving everybody a target. So they're not fighting each other, they're fighting Niers. In his point of view, anyway. I was more worried about what that army from the Wait, what? There, I don't remember if pirate changed this in the text, and my brain cannot remember this. Were the two armies that were mentioned Dragon Speaker Lucifer,
And
and
then the one with the former Wall Lord was on the move.
No.
Yes, the one from Festival.
Yep, that one.
The one from Festival that the former warlord is trying, the Wall Lord is trying to meet up with, and the third army was the one headed to Liscor to join in the conflict and fight the Crusaders. But wasn't there another army that was mentioned? One that was coming from Xeris?
They aren't moving. They're more.
Oh, they
Spreading
wide.
out.
That's right.
Spread
They
out.
widened their blockade of Otislia. I see what you mean. Okay, I remember now. So having noted those things, the big thing about Niers is Niers always looks. There's a reason why Pirate included a scene where Bird walks into the tent and says, "I'm in charge still," because I think Niers is treating Bird the same way he would Foliana, as a powerful force, someone that's his ally, and someone that he can sort of bounce off of, that will surprise him and keep him on his toes. As has been noted before, Niers prefers to be the power behind the throne than the actual power in front, right? He likes to make a joke of himself and be the jester, while somebody else is technically in charge. And Bird serves that function, and I think it's hilarious, and I love it. And the question I asked was whether or not Foliana would like Bird. I don't know.
That was all that. Just when Foliana and Bird, I love it.
New ship.
Foliana would probably eat him.
No! You guys are mean. Okay. Yoda's had some. Yeah.
Yoda's has a comment reacting to Oshi, and they say, "I think Palas is playing a completely different game, using what's happening with the Knolls as a cover, and is concerned that Niers' presence is going to upset it." Well, that's going to happen regardless.
Yeah, but let's unpack that for a second. Yoda's. I'll give you a second to just type if you don't want to speak, but if you would like to speak, could you explain to us what you mean, what their other game could be? Okay, he's typing it up, so we're going to give him a moment. Asteria, why don't we talk about something else in the meantime, and we'll come back to it.
Well, I mean, it does just bring up a minor point that I kind of skipped over, where, you know, like, there is this, right, you guys kind of mentioned Chaldean's headache. One of the things that I kind of took note of is it does seem the continents seem to be swapping headaches, right? Chaldean's got to deal with Niers. Ryoko went over to Tiandria and is bringing along her, not fiance, but quarter. Aaron went to the Deadlands. Windstrom's got to deal with Floss and Fun in a little bit. Like, the only ones who are kind of not dealing with other continents' headaches seem to be Balaros and here.
I just not for long.
That amused me. Like, what do you mean okay, yes, Cal. Windstrom, yes.
Okay.
Courier has a comment, Lynette.
Courier says, "Not only is this fun for Niers, if this ends without this army stat getting wiped, he has a good chance to recruit some blooded, specialized units for the Forgotten Wing. And it's great PR."
Ooh, good point.
Don't forget he wanted the mushrooms. He's also finding out.
Yeah, he wants the mushrooms. He's looking for
fascinated
resources.
by that arrow.
Yep,
he doesn't know about the mushrooms yet, but he's fascinated by that arrow and what it did.
Wasn't the arrow because of the mushrooms, though?
Yes.
Okay.
But there was go ahead, Lynette.
Well, there was a paste put on the arrow, but I don't think he knows quite what it was made from yet. We do.
We do. But
yeah,
he doesn't.
we do. Yoda says, "I don't have a mic, but it seemed like Palas had something going on in this chapter that wasn't yet explained. From what I recall, it hinted that they weren't planning to attack the Knolls, but that it involved the Knolls in some way." And Chaldean is, and this is my own observation here, Chaldean is mobilizing all 6 of Palas's armies because he already knows that we're going to be having to put out many little fires all around their region.
Dyskanator, you have something to say.
And this will be the last comment on this topic, by the way.
Right. I was going to say, my semi-prediction about this is, my feeling here is that Chaldean is trying to maneuver something where he puts out fires in Palace's zone of control, leaves all the major fighting to happen in places outside it, and then kind of consolidates Palace as the unbloodied city-state that has strength of the gnolls that also want to get out of it. So he's kind of doing a little bit of the Lisker thing, but on a larger scale of sort of not quite so and also not quite so crazy. But build out Palace's zone of control, build up a bunch of allies, stay the heck out of the fighting and maneuver it so all the big wars are happening over there, and he doesn't have to deal with it, and build up a base inside a wide-ranging Palace city-state control area.
Oh boy.
I think Chaldean's also got to watch himself. His health is failing, so it'll be interesting to see.
I mean, he's been dying for like 30 years, so
he's not gonna. Well, I think he's the next big character death, but
let's hope not.
Anyway.
But go on. Yeah,
anyway. Okay, so I know we've hit the hour mark, guys. We're going to go a little bit longer because there's one really big topic that we haven't quite gotten to, which is the second part of the name of this discussion, which is flames. So, big reveal kind of at the end of the chapter. Mirsha gets a new class, right? She becomes
Ember Bearer.
An Ember Bearer. And there was a lot of discussion around this for various reasons, so that's kind of what we're going to end the recorded chat with. I'll just sort of open it up that narratively, I thought that this was the weakest part of the chapter. Mirsha is lover-hater. She is a major point of the Wandering Inn, but I do feel like her character has been severely weakened by getting this class, and I felt that this whole conversation where she got it felt very shoehorned in with the chapter. This is really kind of what the weakest part of the chapter for me, and actually the weakest part of the volume so far. I really didn't think she earned it, and I'm kind of interesting to see where it'll go. So opening it up to discussion, like, what are your thoughts about that? Maybe we will start to see, maybe other people get the class. Maybe it'll be a shared class, or maybe it'll be her thing.
Okay, we've got 5 different people who have statements about all of that. Kel is first and states, I think Mirsha's ember is what Belavier said was missing for Aaron's resurrection. That's an interesting take.
I agree with that.
Mr. Europe was next.
Yeah, I thought that the speech was a bit weak, and that the positioning of it. I really like the previous part with her and Gyre walking around, but I thought the speech was a bit weak, and that it wasn't really built up enough. But I do actually like the Ember Bearer class. I don't think it weakens her character, and I see it as like not at all that she can do all the things Maviola and Aaron does. I think it's more of an apprentice style class, that she doesn't create any flames herself. She just carries Aaron's fire, and I think that's a good character development for her. I just think it could have been presented better.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a fair take. I really felt like it should have been if it was going to happen, it should have happened maybe when she was facing off against the witch. That might have been a better placement for it.
Yep.
I didn't have the same problem as many people seem to have with the scene. I definitely felt it was a strong scene, simply because it's Mirsha giving her experience from, the past year of her life basically has been one catastrophe after another, and this is, something she's been through for a long time, and she's basically doing what Aaron does with people in her inn, and that's trying to give them a little hope and a better future, and that they have the ability to really get through this on their own terms. And the Ember Bearer class is basically just an extension of what Mirsha has been doing for a while now, after meeting Belavier, and fighting her off with Aaron's fire. And now she's doing it again. She's showing everyone Aaron's fire is still alive and the hope is still there. And, maybe the section could have used some more despair earlier on in the chapter, I suppose, to really hit it home. But I feel that it wasn't too necessary, because as we've seen with the Null Moot, we've had this conflict brewing there. We've had these disagreements brewing there. And Mersha really showing all the young adventurers really how to get through it, how she's gone through it. It felt right to me for Mersha.
I thought that on the point of the classes, I first had the impression of the class being kind of in another direction from her existing classes, and so kind of drawing her in these sort of multiple different directions. I'm really personally excited about her druiding, and so I think I was a little disappointed that she hasn't been doing more of that, doing more of the magic. But a thing that I realized about it is, one, the Ember Bearer feels very similar in feeling to the Survivor for me. It feels like it builds on the Survivor into taking that out and doing more. And the other thing is, she's a kid. You're supposed to try a whole bunch of different things and find out what actually works. And so I thought that that the fact that she's getting different classes that do different things, that are some of which are literally related to each other but not, is actually kind of fine, because that's how kids here mostly grow up. And I thought that as far as her speech goes, it was someone to point out that it's sort of some things that have been said before, but I think there's a difference, because one, it's Mersha actually deciding to go up and say things to other people, so it was a kind of a moment for her to connect out to people. And also there's an impact there that you may not get if your chieftain or your shaman tells you something, where you get like an 8-year-old kid who has been through hell and back going, all right, pull it together and get things done. Come on, guys. That you might not get otherwise.
Kel is replying to Mr. Wiggles' comment about, she says, it felt to me like Mersha was doing what she thought Aaron would do. Aaron, who taught her about hope and kindness and mercy. She's paying that forward, and Aaron would be so proud. Will be so proud, yeah. Mr. Europe is clarifying his statement from just a minute ago, and he says, I thought the speech and placement in the chapter were the weaker parts. The moment itself was great. Also, while I have loved this volume and how it's different, it's not exactly the first time the pacing has been a bit strained.
Oh yeah, what's up, John? In regards to the Marsha scene, I did feel like it was the weaker part of the chapter. It goes from Mersha being like a braggadocious child to her suddenly lecturing these grown adventurers on her experience, which isn't a bad thing, but it did feel rushed in a sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that might be to what Lynette was saying earlier, or I think Oshi, that time, just the way the time kind of breaks down until the end of the year.
Vorik Q said that it felt bittersweet as heck when I first read about the Ember Bearer. I'm surprised it wasn't a heritage skill. That's an interesting take.
So I actually kind of like this scene in that sense, where Marsha's, I'm gonna say Marsha.
Mersha!
Kind of been Marsha, fine. Mersha's kind of been, this child in the inn, and she's a child of the inn, and the inn's kind of, she's went on adventures, but it's always been, Mersha, the great and terrible, Mersha, the defender of the cave. But since Mersha's been dragged out of the inn, they've kind of been on their own and kind of growing as a character. And through this event, when Mersha was reaching out to the Paragon, I'm only saying because I forgot her name, she wasn't Mersha the something. She wasn't kind of going off of what Aaron would do. She was becoming her own character and doing what she thought she could do.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it didn't strike me as what would Aaron do. It was what can I do? I mean, it was Aaron light, but that's just because those were her parents. She's a child of the inn.
Yes.
I agree with this. I also think that children Once you teach them a lesson and they really internalize it, they will have no problem looking at you and going, well, then why don't you do that? You taught this to me. Why aren't you doing what you taught me? I think that Mersha's reminding all of the adults here that, you know what? This life sucks. Bad things happen. But we get up anyway, right? Y'all have always done that.
So my problem with the last Mersha scene wasn't with anything in it, is that the placement of it really undercut the first Mersha scene, where it ends with Mersha saying to Gaia, hey, let's actually do stuff. We can. Like, you're a 9-foot tall super gnoll. Let's just let's just do some protagonist shenanigans and like get some balls rolling. And then when it cuts back, they're doing nothing and just eating, and then eventually Mersha gives her speech.
Yeah, that was my issue with the scene itself. It undercuts something that they've already established. So they're just hanging around and eating, and they're like, what can I do? And Mersha stands up and already said in a prior scene, let's do something. So I can understand pirates wanting to reestablish everything, but that would only work when the chapter was a larger one where we could focus on the newt itself. But as it was structured, it felt like reestablishing the same thematic point you've already established and trying to build that point again with only half the space left over. And it really undercut the power of the scene.
Well, see, I got a completely different take on that, though. I thought that they were doing something, because sometimes you can't actually go out and fight things or, physically do the things that, sometimes all you can do is words.
That's true, but we didn't get that.
We did. She tried to do that.
Oh,
She's 8 years old. She tried to do words.
She gave the speech, but the speech kind of really felt like it came out of nowhere. And I think that's that's kind of the biggest problem, is it felt rushed, it felt shoehorned. I mean, just probably the biggest issue, I think, from what I'm hearing, and I actually do agree with, is just the placement of this. Like, there were a lot of read-ins to what the scene could be, and it could have been maybe a bigger payoff or more excellent, but it just felt shoehorned in, tacked on at the ending, and then almost like the chapter just cut off. And it's like, well, hold on. Like, so maybe like the biggest issue is just the scene felt rushed, and it didn't have enough build up to it.
And this wouldn't happen with other writers. I've read other writers. They don't write enough for this to feel, but with the way Pirate has trained us, I blame you, Pirate, has trained us to expect things, it feels off. Now, if you were just reading this in a novel structure, maybe it would be okay. It would still be a weak chapter, but it would only be 1 chapter in 30. But we're seeing it in a granular level, and you can notice that it's one of those weak things. I'm sure once it gets to a publishing point, it will be a little bit. It'll be stronger. They'll fix it up. But yeah, I just believe that. Speaking to Mersha's Ember Bearer class, okay, couple of things. I hadn't even considered the fact that she's a druid. Why did we not have her approach the shamans of the Garmarsh and speak to them and have that be the point where they went to go eat food and found something cool, and the Garmarsh gave her wisdom and said, what can we do? And then Mersha stands up, and we could have led from there rather than, and she could have gathered them up very much Aaron style without having to speak. I always love the fact that Mersha doesn't need to speak to inspire people or to do things. That's what I like about Mersha the most. And in this chapter, the way it was structured, she spoke. And that's okay. I guess that's okay. But it just felt wrong coming from Mersha. It's always been, she does something, she listens, she acts. I think the best example of Mersha inspiring people is that moment when she stopped the Gnolls from killing Calrus in the 2 Rats chapter. She interpreted something that she had listened to. She acted on that interpretation. She didn't need to speak, and she allowed herself to be in danger. She showed through action what needs to be done. And even in the prior chapters, one of the things that's always great about Mersha chapters is that Pirate doesn't let language stand in her way. She finds a way. It's a frustration, but it's a momentary one. And I had a question for you, Asteria, before. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So you said that you found that to be the weakest, and the impression I'm getting from your comments has been it's a structural weakness. But what did you mean by it really weakened Mersha the character to get the Ember Bearer class?
So,
could you expand on that for me?
Yeah. Somebody else actually already addressed it with the kind of counterpoint where it's like she's trying out new things as a kid. She's but my big thing is, or like, and it's not actually a copy of Aaron and Mavola. I just kind of, it just seems like every time Mersha do something, like she sees somebody else and she's like, oh, okay, that's mine now. And so every time you see her try a new thing, she copies it. And as somebody pointed out, that's what kids do. Like, that makes sense. She's still figuring out her thing. I just really wish she just wouldn't do that one time.
But yeah, it's been a well that Pirate has gone to quite often. Before I say the last question I had for everybody in the group, if you don't mind, Assyria.
No,
okay.
I will just say, just to kind of wrap this up with Mersha, in response to like how that scene may have been better presented, honestly, if she had gotten this class and this skill back when she was fighting the witch, but it maybe hadn't been revealed, but we knew she got something where, like she's cupping the flames and there's like a class indication, but we don't know what it is, and it had been revealed here by her like empowering the listeners by throwing a flame at them or something. Like, I think that would have been a better payoff, and like we would have been we knew something was happening, but it would have been a bigger payoff. We would have known it was sort of coming. It would have maybe just worked better structurally.
Okay.
But anyway, you want to
last couple of things.
Everyone.
I do want to have last question, but there's a couple of comments. Mr. Wiggles? Okay, go ahead.
What was my point? Oh yeah. On the structure at the end of the chapter and how it felt more of just a cliffhanger, I always think of it as this is a continuously written story. It's a web serial, and with web serials, that's, it's par for the course. It's something you have to come to expect and kind of live with in the end. It's because most web serials do that constantly. It's how the story is told through time, and you can't really rush it. And if you do rush it, and it ends up, failing in other ways rather than just cliffhangers.
Yeah, like I said, Pirates trained us for. Oh, Pirate, it's all your fault that we like you so much. Okay, Lynette.
All right, so Jivan, I think I said that correctly. Jivan says, in response to what you said, in general, Mersha deciding to use words would be an excellent follow-up to her deciding to do stuff, but it felt disconnected because it was a spontaneous event, as in she didn't plan at all to do it. And when we came back, Mersha and Gheeart were just playing games and then going to get snacks. And Kel says, with Maviola and Aaron both gone, I'm okay with someone still around to carry that ember.
Yeah, I get that.
We do need the hope.
Yeah. So my last question for everybody a couple of things. When I was speaking to folks in the Pan spoilers thing, the next day, I'm trying to remember who brought it up. Hang on. It was Cobley? So Cobley brought up something that I hadn't considered. The class might just be something that he asked, does anybody think that why the class wasn't green? Has it happened before? Have there been other bearers of flames? And the only thing I can think of is maybe the class is both practical and magical. And I responded with the idea that there have been other ember bearers, and perhaps there might have been an ember bearer for a dragon lord of flame daddy.
You just could have to slip that in, didn't you?
He always does.
Okay, so it's just the concept that the class might be more than we think and less than we think. It's always about potential when it comes to Mersha. Her classes are never grandiose. They seem pretty practical and simplistic from the outside. Druid, Last Survivor, Ember Bearer. But when you dig into the potential of them, they always have something behind them that it expands it. Yeah. And on that note, I think that's it. Unless we have final comments or somebody wants to say something.
I
You're
have
up,
one
Mr.
final thing. I can't believe none of you mentioned the cutest character that has ever shown up in the Wandering Inn yet. How could you all overlook our poor Jexishe?
Oh, the friendly crawler?
Yes!
The friendly
You guys
crawler!
you've been advocating for a cute Creeler, and you finally got one.
I think that Nears is a bastard, and I love him so much.
Oh, we didn't. Oh, and I completely forgot about Pivir, who's now my new favorite Antinium, and his I'm gonna become a friend with everybody. Okay, there's just a lot of. I will let's end on that positive note because there's so many funny things in this chapter.
All right.
Like there is so many funny things.
There's a lot. We covered a lot of serious topics, and there's definitely some cute stuff that everybody loved. Thanks for letting me kind of host and chat today. Hopefully you guys had a good time. I'm going to end the recording now, and people can hang around and chat for a bit before Oshi finds the movie.
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right. So we are going to be gifted with another rendition of The Wandering Inn, and we're going to get a little background before we get started.
So, we're going back to remember the fight with Belivier and, well, everybody at the inn. So, we'll see if I can actually manage this. We'll call this 8.28 Recap. A hot minute. Pay close attention. There will be a test. The moment is done. We are starting the fun, and it's time to find out who's alive and who's not. We'll kick off the shindig with lightning and indignation that we've gotten ourselves in this spot. Nothing can hurt her. There's a like of murder. I wonder why heroes are so slow to fall. It turns out for a being, ancient and all-seeing, that Belivier is just no good in a brawl. She pulled upon fate, open face dealer's gate, and an army from Hector is yeeted in play, but they're inconsequential with such differential at levels. They're just a distraction today. They're like the Doomslayers who claim to be players, got 1 or 2 shots in and ended up dead. Then Grimwalkin and Cern thought the blue was their turn, but so Belivier flipped up plain odds, said, the witch and the titan are scrapping and fighting, great skills and old relics are both brought to bear neck and years from the raft road. Ashby with left her, took Bella's word I could think she's got a spare. In balance and hovered, the spider recovered, but then ran away since Faith got her derailed for an arrogant minute. Nears thought he could win it. He chased a Rebella and then got impaled. We're wrapping the scene up. It's time for the cleanup. We've just got to figure where everyone parks. Several brothers have died, and the author is fried. Finally working up Mersha into the next arc.
Oh my god, that's amazing!
We need like an applause sound. I don't have a fucking sound deck. Anyone? There we go. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, yeah, I'm with
That was an
Nabisco.
excellent
I already
flow.
failed the test.
I loved it.
We are by. Did you get it?